Hello everyone, Post here. How have things been going? With the collab on the horizon and 2.0 approaching, we have a ton of cool and flat-out broken characters coming out. But with the limited resources, picking who to pull for is going to be a real hard choice. Let's start by checking what's the situation. Espinana came home in 90 pulls, and while Rico should have been an easy skip, she is very cute. She's really funny, and she goes,
Go, go, go!
I had no choice but to at least try. Thankfully, 30 pulls were enough. Absolute boss behavior. My coffers are still holding 125 pulls, and since I haven't played enough of the main story quest yet, there's like 15 more pulls in there, on top of the other 10 from the seasonal rewards. If I lock in, I should be able to start the collab with 150 pulls on me. Going forward, the income hasn't changed much, with an average of 7k look sites for the monthly events. We're still on 77 pulls per month for free-to-play players, 95 for the monthly card users, and 100 if you also buy the Battle Pass. Personally, the monthly card does seem like a decent deal, so I do go with it, which means I should expect to save 47 to 48 pulls between a character release and the next. But let's round this down to 45. When it comes to the gacha itself, 180 pulls for RPT is honestly way too high, but with a 2% drop rate and the 50-50 system in place, the average expense for a new character should be 75 pulls. If I go check my pool history, there's a Luvata in 20, Estra in 120, Aisha in 80, Afra in 50, Inanna in 90 and Rico in 30, which averages out to 65 pulls per character. Lady Luck got me blessed alright. Still, I want to have maximum safety for the units that I want most, so one of my goals is to hoard 180 pools, on top of which I want 70 more than I can safely spend, just in case they drop multiple units that I really want back to back. So let's start by checking these units and see which ones will come pin me to a wall to steal my lunch money. First, we have the collab with Marcille and Falin, but they will be their own thing. RPT goes down to 100 and the first 10 pool will have a 50% discount. Being collab exclusive already raises the fear of missing out flags, and part of me wants to pull just for collection's sake. Hit-wise, Marcille comes in as a pretty standard AoE magic damage dealer. Her trait gives her stacks of magic which boost her damage, and her signature moves are wide AoE attacks. One charges up for 1 turn but applies vulnerable 2 and movement -2 to the targets below the AoE, and this can be sped up with Inanna's extra action or urgent order, while the other goes from a 3 tiles radius to a 4 tile radius explosion if she's holding magic stacks. Also dispels 3 buffs. Damage should be alright, but my Luvata is about to hit 5 stars, and I doubt it's comparable. I would take the 45% crit damage boost plus Scorch and its explosions any day. On the utility side, Mana Recovery gives her extra magic stacks on standby, and if these are full, 2, heals or nearby allies. Convenient Route buffs movement 2 and gives immunity to frost and burning tiles, which is neat, while her reaction lets her preempt and interrupt an incoming magic attack once per turn. If this can proc on Kavari's AoE, it might be fun for Clash, but it's a pretty niche use case scenario. Her 124 speed is also not doing her any favors. Overall, I would slot her in between Luvata and Caris. While she's the face of the collab, I'm afraid she's also fairly low on the pool priority. Again, I would give her a try, mostly for collection's sake. Next, we have Falin, a 78 speed slow healer and shielder. The moment she hits 3 stars, whenever she casts a class skill, her trait adds a physical shield worth 60% of her magic attack to any ally that doesn't have her guardianship buff, as well as a 50% damage reduction on top of it. Oh, and add 2 random level 2 stat buffs for good measure. If a character already has the 60% shield, a second cast will add a 40% one to it. Her trait alone lets her basically shut down most physical damage your team can take. It's kind of crazy. In her skill 3, a pretty standard 3 radius AoE heal plus clear, which also adds another 30% heal proc if the character takes damage, a reaction that saves an ally within 3 tiles from dying, granting them unyielding, swapping position and healing them up for 90% HP, a really cool teleport for multiple party members to keep everyone nice and close, an aura that increases the attack of shielded allies by 16%, and an instant clear, heal and damage 2 buff. Another real interesting piece of her kit is a boosted AoE damage reduction aura, which brings the usual 25% damage reduction up to 45% if her allies are shielded. Run Falin's Blessing, Restoration Magic plus this aura, and the whole team gets a 100% physical shield and 55% AoE damage reduction. Of course, her weaknesses will be magic and piercing damage, but they are not that common in PvE, while for Clash, the damage reduction aura plus the flags might be enough to stop some AoE attackers. Her rank 13 skill also adds an extra heal and damage reduction to if a shield is broken, as well as a 15% crit rate and no reaction debuff to the enemies who are about to take damage from a shielded unit. Personally, I'm not a fan of slow units, and I would love to give these shield plus attack 2 plus damage 2 plus crit rate buffs to my units before sending them off. At 78 speed, it feels like wasting the first turn, but this level of support goes kind of hard. If I've got any pools spare for the collab, Falin is the first one who's gonna get some. After the collab, we'll be back to the World of Peace units. I have them listed in the order they were presented in the announcement video, but do keep in mind that this order is very likely going to change. Let's start with SP Samantha, the Judge. Before each attack, she applies Judgment Brand on the enemies, increasing the damage taken by 10% and an extra 5% for AoE damage taken. In the spellable debuff, that stacks with Vulnerability. Juicy. At the end of her action, she triggers Judgment Execution for a small 30% damage on branded enemies that goes up to 100% if she has Glory Watch. 3 damage from her trait is great already, but it doesn't stop here. At 3 stars, she gets a 15% crit rate boost that shoots up to 50% at 5 stars. In her skill 3, the 3x6 long AoE that we've seen in Spiral Destinies already, the multiple undying reaction that consumes 3 energy to revive her from her base version, use Watch and instant cast Heal plus Heal Block Prevention and Glory Watch, letting Aggression and Papal State allies apply Judgment Brand with their own attacks. Purification, 150% 1 cross range nuke that also applies movement -1 and sets the ground on fire, and then come the bombs. Trial Area, instant cast 5 tiles alert skill, dispels 2 buffs on all enemies on cast and gives her the Glory Watch buff for the extra trait damage. When alert is triggered, it interrupts the enemy and deals 50% magic attack as damage to all enemies in a 1 tile cross. This thing triggers up to 3 times per round, lasts for 2 turns and only has a 3 turn cooldown. Thank god she only has 152 speed, so maybe you still have a chance to counter her in Clash, but if she gets a turn, the fight's over. Trial Area only costs 1 energy as well, and being instant, what can it be followed up with? End of Evil, 3 cost, 3 cooldown, 5 tiles AoE with a 220% multiplier. This goes down by 30% for each enemy hit, down to a minimum of 100%, but any target hit above 4, it's 3 damage. Also, 3 buffs Dispel and another stack of Glory Watch. If you're looking for AoE damage and great utility, I'm afraid she jumps straight in front of Marcille in terms of priority. Probably better than Luvata as well, but I'm addicted to the chain explosions. Thankfully, it doesn't have to be one or the other for me, since she also brings an aura that boosts skill damage by 10% and AoE damage by 20% for Papal State and Aggression units. Being voiced by Tanaka Rie, Rosetta, Lisa, Himeko is also a huge plus, which cements her position in wife territory. Only thing I'm worried about is the investment that she'll take. 5 stars is a long journey, and since I don't pull for weapons, I might have to wait 3 whole banners before her insane 25% crit rate boosting staff is added to the shop. That's gonna take some patience. Next, Credenza, 76 speed slow healer. Her kit revolves around gaining Holy Revelation in order to boost her skills. She gains it on standby by consuming 20% HP, and it's only at 5 stars that she unlocks a prayer to get it at the start of her turn. Her trait also triggers Divine Punishment to deal AoE damage when she's defeated and gives her the Holy Miracle skill. In order to unlock Holy Miracles, she needs to sacrifice HP or take damage enough times to accumulate the 12 stacks required, each stack corresponding to 10% of her HP. This is a one-time use skill with a 1-turn preparation time, at the end of which she dispels 5 debuffs on all allies within 5 tiles, restores 100% HP, gives them 1 to 2 energy, all the level 2 stat buffs, a 1-turn cooldown reduction, and from 4 stars onward, Glorious Grace, another 15% boost to attack and damage. Reaching 12 stacks may take a bit, especially without her signature accessory, which has a 40% HP sacrifice built in, but it's a pretty nice bomb for turns 3 to 4. With her signature, this should be ready on turn 2. Still, this isn't even the best part of her kit. Already at level 1, Kindness and Care lets her sacrifice 30% HP to give 2 energy to an ally and 2 random 2 buffs to all allies in a 2 tiles range of them. If she has Holy Revelation, she also adds 2 more energy and a 2-turn cooldown reduction for all skills, including items. Add Detect X Flag and any 3-turn cooldown skill becomes available every single turn. Let me repeat that. 3 turns cooldowns go down to 0. This is her true bread and butter, but she needs Holy Revelation every turn in order to make good use of it. Helping the Needy is a passive 20% attack heal at the start of her action, with attack 2 and damage 2 summed to it if Holy Revelation is up. Second Coming gives her Holy Miracle a second cast, and apparently the 12 stacks don't reset. Her reaction can reduce the single target damage taken for an ally within 4 tiles by 15%, or 30% if the ally is injured, by sacrificing 10% of her own HP. This can proc up to twice per turn, letting her gain more stacks for Holy Miracles even if she's not directly taking damage. Purgatory Hymn is a wide range AoE heal, attack 2 and damage 2 buff that also gives Credenza Prayful Holy Revelation, the very same 5-star trait buff. If she already has it, this skill also buffs another 15% attack and 15% damage. Free cost, no cooldown, nice healing. Lastly, the Glorious Trial passive, giving her toughness and extra Holy Revelation if she's injured. What's more, if she doesn't have Prayful Holy Revelation at the end of her action, she sacrifices 20% HP to get it. This feels like a mass slot until Credenza hits 5 stars when she gets it from her trait, but until she gets there, that means that she won't be able to give the 2-turn cooldown reduction to an ally on turn 1. Just turn 1. Attack 2 and damage 2 buffs aren't that rare, but the cooldown reduction that she brings is going to be incredible for so many units, whether they're energy hungry or just have long cooldowns. Also, she's still faster than Inanna, so you could bring her along too and give your main damage dealer an extra action after their energy and cooldowns have been reset. Kind of an insane unit, but I don't know how many spare pools I'll be able to put down. Moving to the Union camp, we've got Edgivore. This is what happens when you instruct your designers to make a character as edgy as possible. Bro has dumb spikes everywhere, a scythe for a weapon and a cursed armor that boils his own blood to increase his damage. Go grab some alcohol and take a shot whenever curse or blood is mentioned. His trait gives him 2 modes, Cursed Armor, Binding Sin, which reduces the damage taken by 30% and gives him 5% extra defense for each debuff he has, up to 50%. At the start of his action, he takes in 2 debuffs from nearby allies, and at the end of his action, he gains a stack of Cursed Scar. Cursed Scar is also granted to him at battle start, with the amount of stacks increasing with each uncap, from 2 out of 4 at 1 star to 6 out of 6 at 5 stars. His trait also gives him the instant skill Watered with Blood, which turns up to 5 debuffs into level 2 buffs and lets him switch mode into Cursed Armor Punishment for 3 turns. During Punishment, he gains 40% lifesteal, plus 1 movement, plus 20% crit rate, and a 20% HP shield. Each of his attacks or counterattacks consumes a stack of Cursed Scar, and when these stacks are out, he turns back into Binding Sin. He is immune to Unyielding Lock, and he gets Unyielding when he's about to be defeated, instantly entering the Binding Sin state with max Cursed stacks. When 2 turns pass, or he runs out of stacks this time, he leaves the field. Like mentioned in the traits guide, he gains 20% crit rate and damage at 3 stars, plus an additional Cursed Scar stack, and these go up to 30% at 5 stars. 8 drinks in, and this was just his trait. How's that liver doing? In his skill tree, we find an innate 3 tiles instant charge that ends with a 20% damage to a 2 tiles radius AoE and also gives him a cursed stack. Cursed Blade Blood Slaughter passively adds 15% damage, which increases to 30% when he's in Cursed Armor Punishment. If he's not, it inflicts Immobilize and gives him 2 more stacks of Cursed Scar. For his reaction skill, Bloody Thorns gives him a 2 tile range counterattack once per turn, while Curse inflicts the attacker with Vulnerable 2. On tier 7, Cursed Blade Twist is a small AoE high damage skill that can consume 2 Curse stacks to get an extra 30% crit rate and double its multiplier, up to 300%, while Cursed Blade Abyss has a massive 3 circles range and deals 60% attack as damage while inflicting Heal Block, Buff Block, Unyielding Block, and Stun. On rank 11, Soul Eating Corpse gives him another 20% damage reduction 2 buff steal from his attacker, and adds 2 counters to his reaction. If Alcohol Poisoning hasn't taken you, you can see how this is going to be another crazy damage dealer. Sadly, he also basically needs to be at least 4 stars in order to have 6 curse stacks cap. But free crit rate, crit damage, damage boost and burn soul buffs will make this thing a little powerhouse. The punishment uptime does worry me a little, but a 300% nuke with no cooldowns sounds really damn good, even if he only gets to use it twice before going to sleep for a few turns. Still, he gets some point deducted for being a man, and some more for being flat out cringe. If we are talking about pure damage, I can always count on my S-Trap and wait for Lukamar to come out. So as good as he may be, that's a skip for me. And after taking an ass when dump on Parsifal, it's time for me to put on the clown makeup, cause Yserinde gets the waifu priority based off her goth design alone. She's a weird one, a tanky seeker. Her trait gives her jump for movement and unyielding for survivability. If this is triggered, she also gains skew for a 50% damage reduction for the next incoming attack. Her trait aura makes it so the black feather effect, hers and Nidia's, no longer get consumed, and she also gains an innate skill that lets her place down a feather. This costs 2 energy, is instant for the first cast, then loses its instant label. It creates a feather item on the ground that when stepped on, it inflicts black feather for 2 turns and frostbite for 1 turn to all enemies in a 2 tiles range. She also gets a passive boost to defense and has a defense to attack conversion that increases with her star rating. The energy cost reduction and energy restoration from her trait will also go a long way, making sure that she can spam these feathers. From 4 stars, the pierce damage of her Endless Net aura also gets a 10% boost, going up to 25% at 5 stars. And this Endless Net is going to be her main skill. It selects up to 3 enemies in a 6 tiles range to place a blood feather near to. If there's less than 3 targets, they will be placed near to the closest enemy instead. After casting this skill, she enters the Endless Net aura for 3 turns, during which she can't cast this skill again. The aura gives all allies a 15% boost to pierce damage and damage over time, a 30% life drain, and the ability to inflict an extra minor frostbite if they have a shield of 30% HP or higher. Speaking of shields, her Wing Guard is a passive skill that gives ice armor to allies who step on her feathers before allowing them to move again. 30% HP shield right there. Scattered Feathers also lets her deal extra damage whenever 4 of her items are triggered, while the deflection that she applies to her allies also brings more damage reduction. She looks pretty hot, the trap-based gameplay looks like a lot of fun, and she should be able to stack Frostbite like no tomorrow. What's more, Afra would fit perfectly in an Yserinde, Nidia and Energy Battery setup, and any excuse to bring up my gear is a good one. Come the end of November, we should be getting the 2.0 version and its Timeskip, with the first unit released being SP Maitha. 2.0 will also be met with a fairly big celebration, plenty of free pools, another rebate event, and a Fated Favor banner where you can select 2 units and a legendary drop will be one of them. I might want to save another 100 pools for this one. As for SP Maitha herself, she's an instant mass pool. Likely the one unit all my savings will be circling around, kind of like SP Nana has been for this patch. Her main feature will be coordinated attack and responses. When she uses a skill labeled as Coordinated Attack, all allies who have a Coordinated Response skill will trigger it. Her trait gives her a Damage Buffer module based over max HP, which charges up when she takes damage and gives her a boost to attack based on its steal percentage. A Leader Aura for solo Convallaria allies, which boosts attack, damage, pierce damage, and lets everyone recover 1 energy when performing a coordinated response, on top of the usual stats. She also triggers her own coordinated response when using a coordinated attack, basically always having some follow-up AoE damage. For her skill 3, we start off with Rotating Hammer, laying 50% attack pierce damage to a 3 tiles radius plus knockback. This skill is also a response one. Heavy Charge is a full tile long coordinated attack skill that also gives her +1 movement and lets her move again after casting it if she still has points left. Double Bomb knocks back the first target hit by 2 tiles, then consumes 50% of her buffer for a second AoE hit and further knockback. Emergency Toolkit is a choice skill between a self-heal that consumes some buffer or an instant buff that fills her gauge. Feels like a must-have skill, so she won't have to rely on absorbing damage. Efficient Operation is a collaborative response passive that's going to help with energy regen, especially useful at low ranks, or if you're not running a battery. Her reaction brings enhanced regen, which also helps charging her buffer up. And at rank 7, we have the first defense versus offense choice. Battlefield First Aid heals all allies while buffing Maitha and letting her absorb 50% of the damage her allies take. If her buffer is full, she can consume some for a 30% self-heal twice per turn. All this, but no resolve to stay alive. Curious to see how this plays and just how much damage she can tank. The damage skill instead is a full-on rocket attack, targeting a location to deal 80% AoE pierce damage to all enemies on it, then consuming 50% buffer to command all sort of Convallaria allies to perform a coordinated response. Her basic attack is a coordinated attack too, and we close things down with fully armored Maitha, a passive that gives her plus 200 speed and full gauge at battle start and every 3 turns. With this plus 200 speed, Maitha has got to go fast, hitting 443 total speed and finally bearing Xavier for Clash use. And as someone who likes Clash but has no Xavier, I can't wait for her release date. Her damage multipliers don't seem spectacular and the rocket assault costs 4 energy, but she's not a unit that exists in a vacuum. SP Nanna will have to be around, and we have SP Faycal and Nungal following her up. Before them though, a world of peace left over, Camelot. Fresh in my pierce damage party, he comes in with 30% to 50% boost to HP and a 15% to 35% pierce damage reduction. He ignores block, has a passive 20% life drain, and at battle start, he converts up to 50% of his HP to attack. What the hell? His trait also gives him an instant range skill that inflicts little damage but 6 stacks of pressure, a debuff that lowers the attack and defense by 1% of Camelot's health per stack. This is followed up by a Contempt self buff, which increases his damage by 10%, 30% against enemies with 6 stack of pressure. If he's attacked by an enemy with 6 stacks of pressure and he gets injured, he also recovers 35% HP, and if this is not enough, he gets a 30% HP shield. This thing might have a 4-turn cooldowns, but Camelot feels like a mini-boss off of this trait alone. Before attacking an enemy with pressure, he inflicts 2 more stacks and gains Act Again and Reorganize the army. This last one is a debuff that prevents further Act Again procs for a few turns, 4 turns at low stars, 3 turns at 3 and 4 stars, and 2 turns at 5 stars. If he procs Act Again while Reorganize the army is up, it lowers his duration by 1 turn instead. Again, 5 stars is going to be basically a requirement for him, since it looks like that's when he can act again on alternate turns. Oh, and he also gets another 20% health as physical shield after the first ranged attack every turn. I reiterate, what the hell? In his skill tree, we see the usual 3 tiles charge most melee attackers have, but his has a 120% multiplier. Will to Survive brings another 15% HP, a 50% heal, plus 2 energy regen if he ever gets to the dying state, and this only has a 2-turn cooldown as well. King of the Ashes is a 3 tiles AoE attack that also steals 1 buff from all enemies, applies 2 stacks of pressure, and grants Camelot a 10% shield for each enemy hit. More survivability comes from a passive skill boosting his health by another 15% and adding a 15% heal at the start of his action. When he's attacked by an enemy with lower HP, inflicts Immobilize and Knockback, while also preventing any shield breaking effects. His reaction gives him another instant Act Again while reducing the physical damage taken by 15%, adding a 30% heal and 5 debuffs clears. This thing does have a 5 turns cooldown, but still. His leader aura increases damage by 10% for Union units and 10% more if they have at least a 30% HP shield. Lastly, an instant jump skill with a 3 tiles range that deals little damage and locks reactions for units in a 1-circle area, before switching to a front 3x3 nuke for 100% attack. He might not have free crit stats, but 65% boost to HP, HP to attack conversion, free shields, free actions, self-healing, damage and pierce damage reduction, and a 20% damage boosting aura does sound a little bit absurd. This thing will be sitting in tier 0 for sure. Too bad he releases after SP Maitha, and he's got Nungal and Lukamar closing in. Again, insane unit, but my heart leads my wallet elsewhere. When it comes to SP Faycal, I think it's cute that him and Maitha traded roles, but despite becoming a defender, little bro hasn't put his bow down and continues to rely on alerts. Being a new sort of Convallaria unit, he also joins in the coordinated attack meta. His trait increases crit rate and damage, gives him an extra point of energy, and the coordinated response attack for a 30% damage to a unit within 4 tiles. 3 stars raises his alert count by 1, 5 stars by 2, while also adding a 20% more crit damage if his crit rate maxes out. Split the Sky is a one-target nuke with a 1/3 preparation time. It has a 180% multiplier, which is pretty high, and if he has to perform a coordinated response while charging this up, its damage is doubled. This refers to the 30% from his trait, going up to 60%. Dart Arrow Screen, another coordinated attack, lets him alert in a 4 tiles range, able to proc up to 3 times per turn for a 70% damage per hit. For energy cost, 1 turn duration though. Leap gives him some extra mobility, 1 energy, as well as a crit rate 2, crit damage 1 buff for 2 turns. This jump can go as far as 5 tiles if he's in attack stance, and speaking of stances, this instant skill makes him unable to move, but buffs 15% attack, crit rate and crit damage, while turning into movement stance to deactivate it. Lastly, Steady Aim lets him apply attack -2, damage -2 and passive logs on the enemies if he's attacking outside of his turn. While the multiple buffs can let him reach 120% crit rate and 220% crit damage, he looks more like a single target attacker, and against some bosses, he might not get to proc as many alerts as he would like. Also, I'm not a fan of the 30% multiplier for his coordinated support, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Maitha and Nungal will be enough. While I don't want to flat out skip the guy, cause I have a feeling that if you get all 3, they will all synergize nicely with each other, I'm afraid that he'll be sitting on low priority. And now, Nungal. The quasi-school uniform looks adorable on her, and she picks up Pamina's spear and breaker roll. Her trait turns her damage into magic, and lets her apply magic defense down 3 on enemies around her, while summoning a gun shadow. When she picks this item up, she gains potential simulation, a unique attack and defense buff. Crit 2, movement 1, as well as triggering the Join the Expedition for a self-heal and clear, plus AoE damage. Her inheritance skill gives her an extra 2% crit rate and damage, as well as 1 energy gain if she crits. Too bad I still don't have the base Nungal. In her skill tree, Rapid Strike inflicts damage and magic defense 3 to all enemies in a 1 tile radius near a target, and this counts as a coordinated response as well, usable up to twice per turn. A nice preempt for a reaction which causes 50% damage and teleports her to either her gun shadow or the closest ally within 6 tiles. A passive that lets her move again after attacking and also generates a gun shadow within 2 tiles if there's less than 4 on the field. At the end of her action, she can use Guerrilla Warfare for another free teleport, and she gains speed 3, going up to 348, movement 1 and attack 2. Straight off of Pamina, here comes the jump plus AoE. Coordinated attack with a 4 tiles range and a 3 tiles AoE, dealing 100% damage, applying damage -2 and disarm. If this skill only hits 1 enemy, its multiplier rises to 160%. As she lands, she also absorbs all nearby gun shadows, triggering the pickup effects, as well as gaining a 30% damage reduction and resolve for 2 turns. Waiting for her is going to take a while, and it will honestly hurt a bit running SP Maitha all alone, but at least a second coordinated focused unit feels like a must-have, and I do like the amount of movement and jumps that she has. Not really wife tier, but still pretty high. Next up, we move on to the Elaman Part 2 units, which are not all out. We've got Lukamar, Pooch RunRun and Shams, while Kunishir and a super hot Goldenite Merchant are still waiting for their release as well. Top of them, there's also more unannounced units who only appeared in the trailer, like Totally Not 37, a black-haired Wilder Boy, a dorky looking Union Paladin, and apparently a legendary tier Lightning. We'll have to come back to these, but the next Who to Pull for video will likely come out after SP Maitha. Lukamar is apparently the hottest damage dealer in Taiwan, and being a blade dancer, I get it. Like our Maitha, she has her leader skill embedded in her trait, giving all Elaman units the usual 10% attack, 20% defense, and adding a 5% boost to damage, pierce damage and damage over time that goes up to 10% when Liberation is active. Liberation is another stack mechanic, increasing crit rate by 2% per stack up to 10%, and she can hold up to 20 stacks of it. Her trait also gives her the Pardon innate skill, an instant buff that consumes 10 stacks of Imperial Blood to give 10 stacks of Liberation to all Elaman units on the field. She gains this second stack at the bell start and then slowly at the end of her turn, with the values increasing for each uncapped level. At 3 stars, Pardon will also trigger Wind Dance Slash for 60% damage to 2 enemies in a 3 tiles range. At 5 stars, she applies Vulnerable 3 after each attack and increases the Wind Slash damage to 90%. In her skill tree, Blood Drain Return lets her jump behind an enemy in a 3 tiles range for a 160% attack, after which she teleports back to her starting tile and can move again, also gaining 5 stacks of Liberation. Blade Dance is another jump plus damage that can also target her own allies and triggers Wind Slash near them. As an added passive effect, her Wind Slashes will also blind the enemies and inflict double damage. Blood Dance consumes Liberation stacks in order to boost its already high 160% multiplier, 5 layers for an added 50%, 10 layers to add a 3 tiles radius 80% AoE. The reaction gives her a free dodge at the end of her action, and the same deflect that Yserinde has, 50% damage reduction for 1 hit. A support skill letting Lukamar dance to heal and buff allies as she dodges enemy attacks, and Wind Song, increasing her physical attack by 20% and her damage up to 20% based off her Liberation stacks. Rank 11 has a sand bottle that creates a new type of sand terrain which I guess blinds enemies, but that's not important. What's important is that none of these skills have an energy cost nor a cooldown, so you can give her as many extra turns as possible with SP Nanna, Pace in Anna, Command Order, and she can just rotate between Blood Drain to gain Liberation stacks and Blood Dance to spend them for massive nukes. If you need a bit more AoE damage, Blade Dance to spam those double damage wind procs. Absolute beast of a unit, and she feels way less restrictive to play compared to Parsifal. Not to mention, she's hot as hell, definite wife tier. From hot to adorable, we move to Pooch RunRun, who builder got turned into a circus clown, and she's a 197 speed debuffer and infection spreader. Her trait takes Momo's damage over time damage boosting aura for all enemies in a 3 tiles range, but goes to 25% at 3 stars, adds a forbearance stack mechanic, boosting her defense by 1% per stack, and after being attacked by enemies, she picks the 3 closest in a 3 tiles range to apply a 25% life loss to them, as well as 1 stack of infection and 1 random level 2 debuff. This effect can proc up to 3 times per round, and if there's only 1 enemy, the life loss goes up to 40%. 5 stars increases the damage over time aura to a 35% damage boost, her life loss to 30% and 50%, and adds a 4th proc. She's supposed to be attacked and survive 4 attacks per turn. That seems unlikely, but let's look at the rest of the skill tree before judging. Colored Balls inflicts 50% damage, 1 level 2 debuffs and 40% Scar tier, lowering the enemy attack by 40%. Notable Appearance lets her charge forward to apply 1 round of taunt to all enemies in a 2 tiles range, and she enters the Focus on this stage stance, which lets her dodge all single target attacks up to 4 times by consuming 10% of her own HP. She also gains some damage reduction buffs, and if she has enough Liberation stacks, she consumes them to increase the dodge count to 8, gain a damage over time damage buff, and cancel the HP consumption, also reducing the skill cooldown from 3 to 2 turns. Okay, this is pretty damn amazing for crowd control, and each dodge will also add life loss and infection thanks to her trait. This show begins lets her charge forward for a 50% OE damage before applying a 60% attack reduction to all enemies hit, damage minus 2, pierce vulnerable 2, and 2 level 2 debuffs, while she gains 5 stacks or forbearance. If she already has 10 of these, the attack down increases to 80%. Reaction gives her a damage reduction 2 buff at the end of her action, and if she's in dying state, she gets unlimited dodge for 1 turn with a 5 turns cooldown. Another passive, another dodge if she doesn't have allies near her, that when triggered adds a counter-attack for another 30% life loss, a self-heal with attack 2, damage 3 and double dodge, and lastly an instant skill for 10 stacks of liberation, double dispel, attack 2 and attribute debuff immunity for 2 turns. Cutie Pie may actually pack quite the punch. Between attack down, defense up, self-sustain and dodge spam, she seems basically immortal, only being vulnerable to AoE damage. But with almost 200 speed, she should be able to jump in front of these threats and force them to use their basic attack on her instead. We won't be seeing massive numbers, but for sustained fight, she seems real damn cool. Damage over time damage boost and AoE pierce vulnerable may also make her a better support than Afra for a Nidia Yserinde team, with Yserinde boosting her survivability even further. For now, she sits in maybe, but if I manage to get the 2 damage over timers, she's definitely being promoted to high priority. The last character we can take a look at is Shams, an Elaman breaker. The golden mask design goes pretty damn hard, and he joins the roster as a single target duelist, currently the highest single target damage dealer in the game. His trait gives him toughness and a brand innate skill that sets his HP down to 30% before giving him a 30% HP physical and magical shield, as well as an overdraft debuff, preventing this cast for some turns. The shield value goes up with the star rating up to 70%, while the duration of the overdraft goes down. He applies Challenger to an enemy, and while this effect is up, his damage increases by up to 25%, while reducing the damage and pierce damage taken by 25%. In his skill tree, we see a 4-tile leap, dealing damage to all enemies in a 3x2 area in front, and applying defense down 3. If this only hits one enemy, the damage multiplier goes from 60 to 120%. If he has 5 stacks of liberation, he inflicts 9 stacks of break the shackles, boosting damage, damage over time, and pierce damage taken by 1% per stack up to 30%. If he has 10 stacks of liberation, this skill becomes an instant cast, but can only be used once per turn. King's Horn Kill deals 100% attack as damage, but inflicts the enemy with Taunt and Challenger, before providing Shams with Primary Resistance, the same buff that most bosses get, reducing damage over time by 50%, and giving him immunity to stun, knockback and skill lock. He also gets the Ready to Go buff, which makes his next skill cast that requires preparation, skip it and act immediately instead, as well as Gladiator Overlord, which lets him counterattack and increases the counterattack range, damage and proc number. Blazing Sun is set preparation attack. When preparation starts, it inflicts movement -3, taunt and challenger on the enemy, while gaining primary resistance and Gladiator Overlord himself. When this attack hits, it inflicts 180% attack as damage, and if he can consume 10 stacks of liberation, he gains a 100% attack boost and 100% increase in multiplier. Rising Sun is a non-instant buff that gives him ready to go and act again, something to use for a 1-turn downtime if he's far from the enemy. Also has a 3-turn cooldown. Gathering the Light passively increases the liberation stacks at the end of his turn, as well as giving him ready to go. His reaction is just some damage reduction, 15% base, 15% when having a shield, and extra 15% when attacked. Scorching Sun gives him more ready to go, while Emperor's Secret Blood lets him go back to above 30% HP, while buffing some damage reduction, shields and HP regen. He looks more like a high-risk, high-reward character. If he gets hit by pierce damage or afflicted with damage over time, he doesn't even have resolve to survive 1 turn. Most of his damage is single target as well, so anything that dodges will be the bane of his existence. The damage though, 280% Blazing Sun, maybe twice per turn, plus 100% counters, make him a beast for bosses. Defense down 3 also makes a reappearance after Homa, but I don't know. For bosses, a lot of characters have been getting specific damage multiplier boosts in their kits, and I want to see what else they're going to come up with before making a decision. For now, maybe, and just for big nukes. Now that we have an idea for what the characters do, what will the future teams look like? SP Samantha boosts AoE damage for more aggression units. This includes Luvata, SP Revia, Rico, Marcille and Caris, while Credenza brings attack, damage and energy buffs, plus the cooldown reduction to bring End of Evil to 0. Yserinde will be a great addition to damage over time teams thanks to her endless web aura, tailor-made for Nidia, with Afra and later Pooch RunRun as a support. Tabare, Momo and rank 13 Simona will join as additional teammates as well. Iron Maitha brings a whole new AoE damage team with SP Nungal, rank 13 Nonowheel, SP Nanna at its core. SP Faycal I'm not that big a fan of. Camelot seems broken as hell, and his leader skill plus the rank 13 skills for Auguste and Gloria will likely revive a direct damage union team, with Lutfi joining in for his vulnerable and extra crit. Lukamar's leader skill apparently makes rare Elaman units playable as well, but she seems like a great standalone unit too. We'll have to wait for the details on the rest of the elements, but she already brings a good buff to Shams, and I hope the Golden Knight Merchant and 37 will also pair off nicely with her. One little problem is that as free-to-play players or low spenders, we can't get them all, but the choice might not be as hard as it looks. Going with the heart alone, my first pick is Iron Maitha. Love the armor and the sort of Convallaria synergy. I'm going to put down 180 pulls for her for maximum safety. This leaves me with 285 that I can spend between the collab and the World of Peace units, but there's a problem. SP Nungal comes out 2 banners later. If I spend all 285, the worst case scenario will catch me 45 pulls short, and if I lock in the 180 for Nungal, I'm left with 240. With Lukamar coming out immediately after, a triple safety will leave me with just 105 pulls. Funny enough, I could skip Shams and still have another guaranteed safety for GoldenEye, but that is 4 banners in a row eating up to 180 pulls, which, come on, it's not exactly realistic. Now, like I've said at the beginning of the video, my average expense for a new unit has been 65 pulls, while the actual one, counting 50% 50-50 losses, should be 75 pulls per new unit. And this would let me pick up almost everyone, basically just skipping men. And from here stems the plan, building a safety net to guarantee that I get the units that I want, while having a realistic average buffer to spend on top of it. By skipping Marcille and Falin, if the average expenses for a new character keeps sitting in the 75 pulls range, my savings should never dip below 165 pulls. They are collab units though, but the only other unit I'm willing to maybe part with would be Credenza. I think I might still give the collab banner a shot, but stop at 50 pulls total. Whoever comes home, comes home. Alright then, I guess that's going to be it for me for the moment. Let me know which characters and teams you're looking forward building the most, and as always, thanks a lot for watching, and see you soon. Ciao! Cause he 几度路过。